Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to a chapter-by-chapter read-through of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. We are circled around, and we are now doing the Fellowship of the Ring, and we are up to Chapter 3. And once you disregard the weird beginnings of this book, you see that Tolkien is quickly getting down to business. Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit, from the novel The Hobbit, has left his magic ring to his cousin Frodo. And the wizard Gandalf has warned Frodo that there seems to be a lot more to this ring than he originally thought when Frodo found it all those decades ago. Gandalf leaves, presumably to do some research, inquire into the nature of the ring, and when he comes back, he is all but sure. He is positive that there's not only more to this magic ring, but that it is, in fact, the Ring of Power. The One Ring forged by the Dark Lord Sauron in a previous era, and that Sauron is desperately looking for. It contains a lot of his power. If Sauron were to reclaim the ring, all of Middle-earth would be made slaves. Darkness would descend from which there was no dawn. So the most important thing in the world has been sitting on Frodo's mantelpiece for all this time. Gandalf comes back and tells him that, gives him a good deal of exposition in Chapter 2, and Frodo comes to the decision that since this thing is so perilous, he must leave. He must leave the Shire, so that he doesn't endanger the Shire. The Dark Lord of Sauron already knows from torturing Gollum, the creature who had the ring all that time, of the existence of the Shire, of the existence of hobbits, and of the existence of the name Baggins. So the Dark Lord's emissaries could be making their way all the way across Middle-earth. This is from Mordor is in the far east, the Shire is in the far west. His emissaries could already be on their way to the Shire. And who knows what those emissaries will be like, or what they won't stop at, or who they'll endanger. So Frodo knows that he has to take the ring and leave. And Gandalf drafts his gardener, Sam Gamgee, to go with him. And at first, Frodo doesn't know where he wants to go, or what he's going to do. He thinks his plan is to make for Rivendell, the legendary last homely home on Earth, a stronghold of the elves of Middle-earth. His plan is to go there, and Gandalf approves of that plan, but says that he has to go. He has other things to do. He has more errands of his own to run. So Frodo and Sam and the young hobbit Pippin set out on the road out of the Shire themselves. Just the three of them. They have gear and packs and blankets and whatnot. And for a while, they travel in the idyllic beauty of the Shire. Long, lovely evenings. It's been a beautiful year. Walking peacefully under starlight, camping on grass and the crooks of trees. Not really thinking anything of any danger. They're still in the Shire. It feels so much like home to them that Tolkien strikes a very folksy attitude, a kind of folk tale attitude. At one point, for instance, this is one of the only times like this in the book, and this tone changes. This tone goes away. But at one point, the three hobbits are sleeping just out in the wilderness. And we're told a few creatures came and looked at them when the fire had died away. A fox passing through the wood on business of his own stopped several minutes and sniffed. Hobbits, he thought. This is the fox that's thinking, an animal thinking this way. Well, what next? I have heard strange doings in this land, but I have seldom heard of a hobbit sleeping out of doors under a tree. 3 of them. There's something mighty queer behind this. He was right, but he never found out any more about it. That kind of thing, sort of talking folklore animals, very much belongs in The Hobbit more than in The Lord of the Rings. It's not going to be common in this book that sort of thing happens. But even in the midst of that idyllic sweetness, there's danger. And it comes from 2 different places. Gandalf has already warned Frodo that the ring wants to be found. It wants to return to its master in Mordor. I remember the first time I read this book, long before most of you were born, thinking, well, how does a ring want anything? But it's a great evocation of creeping, unsuspecting evil. Wonderfully done. And at one point, when our friends are on the road, they hear someone coming. They hear hoofbeats. They actually think it might be Gandalf, who is late. He has promised to join them on the road, and he is not there. And at the last minute, Frodo, every instinct that Frodo has says, we should hide. we should drop off the road into the verge and the trees and the grass and hide from whoever's there. And sure enough, it's a rider on a black horse. It's not Gandalf nor anyone else they've ever seen. It's a big person, first of all. It's not a hobbit. It's not a pony or anything. It's a very ominous figure that walks its horse right up to about where they are, and they can hear the figure sniffing the air. That's the outside danger. But the inside danger is that at that moment, Frodo feels a compulsion he's never felt before to put on the ring. The ring wants him to put it on because he will become immediately visible to the rider. Frodo doesn't know that. He has no idea why he's feeling this compulsion, but he feels it more than he's ever felt it before. It's almost impossible for him to resist. That's not the rider. That's the ring. The ring wants to be found. We don't know anything about it. It's a very creepy moment. The rider moves on. And our friends decide, better stay off the road as much as possible. Better be wary. We are not safe. Even though this is still the Shire, we are not safe. It's a well-done moment. It's one of the first of many moments where our innocent trio, and then a quartet of hobbits, is awakened to the nature of the outside world, which is entirely corrupted by Sauron. Sauron is growing in power and preparing to make war on the outside world. The peaceful idyll of the Shire was an illusion anyway. That war would have come eventually all the way to the west coast. The hobbits continue on, and it happens again. They are hiding, and another cloaked figure on a black horse, maybe the same one, arrives, dismounts, and starts to crawl along the ground. It's a wonderful moment where it's sniffing and snuffling, and you get the sense that it is finding the ring. It is gradually triangulating on the ring. You have to ask yourself at that moment, if Frodo hadn't had that feeling to get off the road and hide, what would that original Black Rider have done? Killed them all? It would certainly have taken the ring, or searched them. The whole story could have ended right there. You also have to wonder, as I do, why Frodo felt that instinct to hide. Wouldn't the ring have quelled that instinct if it wanted to be found? Wouldn't it have made him feel more secure, not less? It must be his good hobbit sense. We hear about hobbit sense a lot in this book. But this other figure is creeping closer and closer to them when suddenly it flees because of a light and some singing. Because our three heroes meet a group of elves, led by an elf named Gildor. These elves are wandering through the woods, and they are happy to meet these hobbits, especially a hobbit like Frodo, who knows a bit of Elvish. They consider him to be an incredible prize. They've never met a hobbit like him before. He is good in conversation, graceful in a way that Pippin and especially Sam are not, and the elves lead our three hobbits to a wonderful wooded arbor, a place they obviously use often for their nighttime, with gentle lights and gentle grass and wonderful, wonderful places for you to bed down and sleep like you've never slept before. The first touch that we feel in The Lord of the Rings of how differently the elves will be portrayed than they were in The Hobbit. And also, I would argue in this chapter, some of our first real glimpses of how Frodo is different from Bilbo. The characterization that we get of Frodo in this chapter is not anything like what Bilbo would have been in the same situation. We're told by the elves that Bilbo has been in that situation, that they have met him right there, in the same place. But he doesn't seem like it's the same character. This is the beginning of separating Frodo not only from Bilbo, but also from Sam, and from Pippin, and then later Merry, into a character of his own. An oddly elf-like character, as is often pointed out in this book, and more graceful, more worldly. Frodo, we're told constantly in these open chapters, is always interested in news of the outside world. He does not have the cloistered insularity of most hobbits. He wants to know about the outside world, learn about it, study it, reflect it in his own behavior. The elves don't know anything about why he's wandering. They don't know why Gandalf has not shown up. That alarms them. That tends not to be true. They're not sure how far the hobbits should let it bother them. This is the first time in the book where we're told that it's not wise to meddle in the affairs of wizards, for they are quick to anger. I've lost count of how many times I've had that line repeated back to me in various circumstances. But the elves are worried that Gandalf has made a promise to meet and not met it. Obviously, that is very rare, and we're going to learn later in this book that it's almost unheard of that Gandalf says he will be at such and such a place and such and such a time is not there. The hobbits are wandering on their own. But these elves, Gildor and his friends, don't seem to have the ability that some other elves do in The Lord of the Rings, of being able to sort of just divine what's in Frodo's thoughts. Frodo meets people who don't get told anything about his mission that somehow manage to divine it anyway. Not only elves, but also Faramir. Men of a certain far-sighted quality can also do that, but not Gildor. He and his elves don't have any idea what's going on. They just warn Frodo, keep going. Shire is not safe. Don't be complacent. You are in danger. So if your goal is to go on the road and continue on, then definitely do that. So that is chapter 3. We don't even have a core cast yet, but we've had a very important revelation in the course of this chapter. Very well done revelation. Not only we get the revelation that the Shire is not safe, that the servants of the Dark Lord have in fact gone that far west. They do know exactly where to go and what to look for. We're told by Sam that they've already made inquiries by name, Baggins by name. So the danger is right on the doorstep. Frodo probably shouldn't have waited as long as he did to leave. Gandalf should probably not have stayed around at Bag End for months, just sort of having tea and scones instead of sending Frodo on his way right away. Delay here has been a big mistake. The Dark Lord is acting faster than the good guys think. We get that. But I would argue, this will be a point that I'll strike a few times in these upcoming chapters, I would argue that this chapter is also important in laying out a different tone that Tolkien is going to adopt. He's going to adopt a different tone with Lord of the Rings than he did with The Hobbit. He's going to take his time getting to the fullness of that tone. We don't get to the fullness of that tone until a chapter called The Council of Elrond. But this is still pretty different than The Hobbit. Yes, we have a talking fox. And yes, we have our friends beginning a quality in Lord of the Rings that its detractors love to lampoon, which is endless amounts of pages devoted to people walking around. We get a little bit of that here. It's interspersed. We get elves almost right away. But my argument would be that not only is the dialogue between the hobbits more adult than anything that we see in The Hobbit, but also that the evocation of danger is worse and more nuanced than anything we get in The Hobbit. I think we're starting very gradually to see the new tone of this book, and I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm loving it more for this very slow chapter-by-chapter read-through than I have my last few rereadings. So once again, as with The Two Towers and The Return of the King, I'm happy that I'm doing this. So that's chapter 3. We will move on to the next chapter next time, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.